As of a week ago, Optus was hacked with over 9.8 million customer records exposed, and 10,000 of those were actually put on the internet for everyone to see. So you might be wondering what data has been breached, how to know if your data has been breached, and what you should do if you've been caught up with this. So we're going to cover on how this could impact future credit applications, including a home loan, and one simple action you can take from this video, including a website that will check out if your data has been leaked. So if you want answers to all those questions, keep watching. So what actually happened? On the 22nd of September, Optus notified its customers via the media that they had been hacked. Frustratingly, it took them 2 days to actually notify individual customers, so they didn't start getting into touch with people who were affected until the 24th of September. By the 26th, advised any customers that had their driver's license or passport details compromised as a part of the attack. But the worst was still yet to come. Optus has just advised that of the 9.8 million customer records that were exposed, they've identified that 14,900 valid Medicare ID numbers. So not only has your passport or potentially your driver's license, your date of birth, and all that other sensitive information been exposed, they've also got your Medicare, a second form of ID to pretty much complete your 100 points. Which probably leads you to the question, what data was actually breached? They've confirmed that names, dates of birth, phone numbers, email addresses, street addresses, driver's license numbers, passport numbers, and Medicare numbers have been compromised. But thankfully, your payment details and passwords haven't been compromised. Pretty much the easiest things to change. You might be wanting to know, how do you know if your data's been breached? Well, there's two things you can do with it. Pretty much anyone that's signed up with Optus since 2017 would be at risk of having their data exposed. Thankfully, only 10,000 records were released to the general public. So if you want to know if you've been compromised as a part of that data breach, you need to contact Optus by calling 13 39 37, or on their app, they've got a chat function. It's pretty, takes a bit of time because there's obviously a lot of people hitting them up at the moment, but at least you can kind of know direct from the horse's mouth if you've been exposed. And if you have, they're potentially offering a credit monitoring service like Equifax, which we'll show later on in the video. Will monitor you and actually give you notifications if someone's applying for credit using your credit file. If you don't want to go through that whole process, you can check out a website, Have I Been Owned? With the address below, you can put in your phone or email address in, and it'll tell you, how many data breaches you've been owned in. It's, not a new thing, unfortunately. The data's out there, but I think the thing that's probably worse with the Optus data is that there's a lot more. It's not just your email address and your phone number or passwords. It's personal identification, stuff that you can use to do an application for finance. You can use for identity fraud. It's pretty frightening. What can you do to prevent identity fraud? Well, the first thing is you can put a credit freeze on your credit file. Pretty much a credit ban ensures that a credit reporting bureau won't disclose any information from your credit file to a credit provider. So if you try and do an application for finance while you've got a credit ban, it'll get straight up declined because the credit provider will say no, I've got no information on Jaden, don't know who he is. You shouldn't give him an application for finance. So this can be good because it means that no one can apply for credit while you've got a credit ban on. So how hard is it to do? It's actually pretty straightforward. I tried to do it this morning. Pretty much you can follow through the links, which I'll include on this description below. You put in, your name, last name, date of birth, driver's license number, the one that's been compromised, ironically, your street address, all that sort of stuff. You can do an initial ban. So they'll ban it for 21 days is the only thing to keep in mind. So you need to keep renewing this, potentially get your driver's license or your Medicare reissued so there's no new numbers there. Actually also ask like Equifax or, the other providers to kind of contact each other because there's three main providers. There's Equifax, Experian, and Ilion. So just keep that in mind. It's a really good one. It takes 2 seconds. It's pretty quick to do. You don't need to wait on a call. So I definitely suggest jumping on that and doing credit ban if you're worried about an application, about some people applying for credit on your name. I did get asked a question yesterday, what happens if I have a current home loan application in progress? What happens if I'm about to do a pre-approval, if I'm about to apply for finance and I do a credit ban? Yeah, it's really tricky. So if you're about to apply for finance, don't put a credit ban on there because if you do a credit ban today, you apply for finance tomorrow, the bank will reject you because no one's allowed to access your credit file while the credit ban's in place. So keep that in mind. If you've already made an application for finance, so you might have done a pre-approval, say 2 weeks ago, the bank's already approved you subject to, finance, subject to valuation, something like that. That's fine because they generally only do one credit check when you do the initial home loan application. So pretty much, the sequence of events would be, do your pre-approval today, the bank conditionally approves you or formally approves you. Once they're formally approved, you can put the credit ban on because then you're not doing any more further applications for finance from that. As for the other information that was leaked, the driver's license, Medicare, so can you get a replacement driver's license? It's been hacked. Answer is yes. So with the different states, they've actually come out and individually said that they'll let you reissue the number. It's a different process depending on the state. I read in sort of ACT potentially it's online. I checked for Queensland here, and you actually have to go to the Main Roads office, which is a little bit annoying because you've got to go there in person rather than just sort of do it online and they post it to you. But they'll do it for free in Queensland at least, which is nice. South Australia, it's a similar situation. Tasmania still stinging you with the fee. Northern Territory waiving the fees, and that. The Medicare news is only news, so it's only just come out sort of in the last 48 hours. Potentially, you'll have to get a new number issued. The other question I did have yesterday, if you've got a home loan application in progress, for example, your loan's approved, you're waiting settlement, what happens if your ID changes? Do you need to provide it to the bank? The answer is yes, you do. You potentially need the updated ID. If they've already kind of completed their ID verification process, they generally don't need to do it again. So if you've already seen your loan approved and you're waiting on settlement, it's unlikely they're going to need your new ID updated. If you haven't quite put an application to the bank, they're potentially going to need it. They probably want it for their records anyway. So how do you know if you've been hacked as well? I guess outside of this, the government has a pretty good website here that I'll include a link below that has a questionnaire that sort of describes the situation and some of the actions you can take. It's a really good one to check out as well. A couple of guides on identity theft, on some of the issues and the signs of identity theft. Common one that's sort of come out of this whole Optus hack is people getting sort of random text messages saying like, hey, Jaden, I've got an Amazon delivery for you. Stuff like that you've probably seen before. You might see it more because now potentially 10,000 people's phone numbers have been in the darknet and sort of publicly accessible, which really, that's causing a lot of grief. Then potentially you might have to look at getting a new phone number to stop that. Things that might be happen are unusual charges on your credit cards. Like I said, this credit cards weren't actually exposed as a part of this hack, but it's a pretty common thing to happen where cards get skimmed, information goes online. So just keep an eye out for any weird transactions on your credit cards, and you can pretty much call up straight away, put a block on a lot of credit cards now as well. I know with most of the major banks, you can actually do it on the app. You can say like, pause my credit card or lock my credit card because I think there's an issue, and then you call up and they'll cancel it and reissue it pretty quickly. And the big one is also password management. Again, passwords weren't exposed in this hack, but it's something that we are pretty big on. Here is using sort of password managers like sort of 1Password or the like, and multi-factor authentication. So it's not good enough just using your mother's maiden name plus your pet plus your date of birth and some accuracies. It's not going to work. You need like actually secure passwords, more than 25 characters, with sort of all sorts of random characters thrown in there. And you want multi-factor authentication. Actually, SMS isn't the most secure because, as we've sort of seen with Optus, it can get hacked. People can port your number and get access to that. I use some password managers to help with managing that. Definitely not an ideal situation. If you were an Optus customer and you're worried about being hacked, potential identity fraud, Equifax has a good service. I actually got this a few years ago. I was hacked. Data was leaked in a Marriott hack a few years ago. So they actually offered this Equifax credit monitoring service for free, which Optus has done now. But it's a good one for a bit of peace of mind if you're concerned about this. You can obviously get your one free report a year, but then they have different stages of credit monitoring. There's one that's like $14 a month. So it's pretty stingy, but it at least gives you notifications. So anytime you might apply for a credit card, it sends you an email straight away like, hey, Jaden, someone's applied for a G Go MasterCard. Is this you? And if it's not, you can get it on the blog. Because otherwise, this is something you don't even see. You don't get any notification when someone applies for credit, or when you apply for credit on your credit file, you have to manually request it. So it can be a really good one to kind of check out. And yeah, like as part of sort of best practice with identity fraud, like what's some stuff you can do. I think definitely if you don't want to pay for the service, the free credit monitoring, at least every 12 months, you want to sort of check your credit file to make sure there's nothing that shouldn't be on there. Even you might be surprised. It would happen almost every other week where we're helping out, a new client here doing a mortgage. We'll get their free credit file to say like, hey, here's this. And ask them like, oh, what's this credit card you've got here from GE Money? Like, do you remember, or Latitude it's called now? Do you know what it is? You've got like a $5,000 limit. Like, oh, I had a credit card 10 years ago. So it'd be a good way, if you haven't looked at your credit card ever, go request it now. You can get it from a couple of these websites, from Equifax or Elion, or there's a bunch of them. Definitely, regularly cycling passwords and using secure long password is really important, and not using sort of the same password across multiple platforms is a really bad idea. And, as much as you can, destroy old documents, try and cycle, your personal details. In the description below, I'll include details on how to get your credit file and how it can sort of impact you going forward. It's a pretty scary sort of prospect. I think, unfortunately, this sort of stuff's probably going to become more common. It definitely is more common in the States. I mean, like you can see from the have you been owned, it'd be interesting to see, like, if you have an old enough email address, there's so many things that are being exposed. It's just, it might just be email address previously, but more and more, I think this is going to be happening. So you just want to be able to be more secure with your internet safety, because it can affect your home loan, your whole financial situation moving forward, potentially. Because if you have, fraudulent transactions on there, someone takes out 1,000 credit cards in your name and runs up a bill and puts them in default, then it could potentially cause you, could limit your access to credit moving forward. It could mean you might not be able to get that. So if you do need help with finance, at Hunter Galloway here, we help home buyers across Australia. Hit us up at huntergalloway.com.au. And until next time, see ya.